Order, order. Statement, Home Secretary Priti Patel.
Madam Deputy Speaker, with permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to make a statement on the progress on the Windrush Lessons Learned review. As I've said in this House on a number of occasions, the Windrush scandal is an ugly stain on the face of our country and on the Home Office. Wendy Williams' independent report laid bare institutional failings over several decades that let down so many who had given so much to Britain. It was damning about the conduct of the Home Office and unequivocal about the institutional ignorance and thoughtlessness towards the issues of race and the history of the Windrush generation. As I've told this House previously, this was simply unacceptable. And my response has been swift, strong, and uncompromising. I apologised unreservedly for the injustice, the hardship, and suffering of members of the Windrush generation at the hands of successive governments. I promised to listen and act to reform the culture of the Home Office to better represent all of the communities we serve. And last month, I announced that I accepted the review's important findings and that I would come back to the House to update you all on the progress implementing these recommendations. After years of injustice and countless warm words, the Windrush generation deserve to know that action is urgently underway. Over £1.5 million has now been offered by the Windrush Compensation Scheme. Bishop Webley and I launched and hosted the first meeting of a new cross-government Windrush working group to address the wider inequalities affecting the Windrush generation and their families. 3 subgroups have now been established to look at how we implement the recommendations, how to design the new community fund, and how best to work with the new Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities. And this group is also advising on our new communications campaign to encourage more people who were affected to come forward. And I'd like to put on record and give my thanks to Bishop Webley and to everyone involved for their ongoing support as we not only implement the findings from the Lessons Learned review, but also as we come together to improve our engagement, our communication, and also our outreach to the communities affected. This is just the beginning. Urgent and extensive work is taking place across the Home Office and beyond on all the recommendations. Together, the Permanent Secretary and I are reviewing every aspect of how the department operates, its leadership, the culture, policies, practices, and the way it views and treats all part of the community it serves. My ambition is for a fair, humane, compassionate and outward-looking Home Office that represents people from every corner of our diverse society, which makes our country great. And that means confronting Wendy Williams' findings head-on to deliver lasting change. To do this, we have divided the recommendations into 5 parts. This will ensure sweeping reforms to our culture, policies, systems, and working practices to reach across the entire department, an approach that Wendy Williams has welcomed. And we are consulting external experts, community organisations, and the very people the Home Office has failed in the past in an extensive programme of engagement to ensure that officials understand the change that is needed and that the organisation at every level learns the lessons of what went wrong. I have been clear to my officials that this is not a box-ticking exercise. A delivery plan has been drawn up to ensure meaningful and rapid action. We are embracing the need to change our culture across the board, and in many cases going further than the recommendations that Wendy has made. I will now set out just some of the work underway on the recommendations under each of the 5 themes. Firstly, righting the wrongs and learning from the past. I have apologised unreservedly to the Windrush generation, but sadly we know their faith and their trust in those who sit on both sides of this House has been badly affected and damaged over many years. A series of reconciliation events to rebuild the relationship between the Home Office and those who were affected will now take place. This is an essential step to enable people whose lives were shattered because of Windrush to directly articulate the impact this scandal has had on their lives. We must learn from the past. Mandatory training is being introduced for new and existing members of the Home Office staff to ensure everyone working across the department understands and appreciates the history of migration and race across the country. Every single existing new member of Home Office staff will be required to undertake this learning. And we are going further by introducing a new process to ensure that all new policies are developed in an inclusive way, factoring cultural and historical contexts, and with effective mechanisms to monitor and, where necessary, resolve any concerns. Secondly, we will create an inclusive workforce in the Home Office. The Home Office must reflect the diverse communities it serves at every single level. There are simply not enough individuals from Black, Asian or minority ethnic staff working at the top in senior roles, and there are far too many times where I am the only non-white face in the room. Action must happen now. So right now I'm introducing more diverse shortlists for senior jobs, specialist mentoring and sponsorship programs to help develop a wider pool of talent and drive cultural change. And while it is reassuring that the Home Office is on track to meet its aim of 12% Black, Asian and minority ethnic representation in senior roles by 2025, my ambition is to go further, because the department cannot truly reflect the communities it serves unless it represents the very people from within the community that they serve. Protecting, supporting and listening to every single part of the community it serves is a vital lesson to be learned. Thirdly, I am changing the Home Office's openness to scrutiny. Policy and decision making must be vigorously examined to ensure that any adverse impact on any corner of our society is identified and acted upon quickly. So to ensure we better understand the groups and communities that our policies affect, we are overhauling the way in which we build up our evidence base and engage with stakeholders across the board. I expect my officials to engage with community organisations, civil society and the public, and I will be looking for evidence of this in every piece of advice that ministers receive. Wendy Williams was clear that a lack of insight into the community experience meant the Home Office missed opportunities to anticipate the Windrush scandal. She stated that officials should and could have done more. She effectively said, we must all do better at walking in other people's shoes. I will overhaul the department's risk management framework so we can identify problems sooner, understand the unintended consequences upon people and communities of decisions, and keep the protection of the public at the heart of what we do. This will give officials the knowledge, the understanding, the responsibility to raise risks and concerns rather than hide them, and ensure that they are listened to and acted upon. Fourthly, there will be inclusive and robust policy making. It is key that we build institutional memory and reflect past learnings and experiences when setting out new approaches. So mandatory training on the public sector equality duty and the impact assessment processes. It is key that we build institutional memory and reflect past learnings and experiences when setting out new approaches. So mandatory training on the public sector equality duty and the impact assessment process is being rolled out across the department, including for the most senior staff. And all impact assessments and submissions to ministers must, as well as considering the equalities impact, they must also address the risk to vulnerable individuals and groups. The final and most critical theme, Madam Deputy Speaker, is a more compassionate approach. People, not cases. This is at the heart of ensuring nothing like the injustices faced by the Windrush generation can ever happen again. The injustices of Windrush did not happen because Home Office staff were bad people, but because staff themselves were caught up in a system where they did not feel they had the permission to bring personal judgment to bear. Madam Deputy Speaker, I myself have heard from victims directly when they have spoken of decision-making as a process that ground people down, a process that lacked compassion towards the very people who should have been supported. I have heard people speak of being dismissed as if they just did not matter and as if their voices were irrelevant. Putting people first will be built into the reforms that we make. Everyone making decisions must see a face behind the case. We must feel empowered to use our own discretion and pragmatism in decision making. The overwhelming of the British public would agree that it's right that those with no legal right to be in this country must not be allowed to exploit the system. But we must protect the law-abiding majority, and to build and maintain public confidence in the immigration system, it should not be easy for those here to illegally flout the rules, but we must make sure we have the right protections in place for those whose status should have been assured. We need a system that has to be fair. What happened to the Windrush generation is unspeakable, and no one with a legal right to be here should ever have been penalised. I've tasked my officials to undertake a full evaluation of the compliant environment policy and measures, individually and cumulatively, to make sure the crucial balance is right. I've asked them to evaluate the changes that were made to immigration and nationality laws over successive governments to ensure that they are fit for purpose for today's world. And if those changes weren't communicated effectively enough, we will act to make them so. Have no doubt, where we find problems, I will seek to fix them. But equally, be under no illusion, if people are here wrongly or illegally, then naturally we will act. We are determined to get this right. We owe it to the Windrush generation and, of course, to their descendants. Wendy Williams has asked that we carefully consider our next steps to deliver both meaningful and lasting change. I will deliver on that commitment and, of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, continue to update the House. In September 2021, Wendy Williams will return to the Home Office to review our progress. I'm confident she will find the start of a genuine cultural shift within the department, a Home Office that is working hard to be more diverse, more compassionate and worthy of the trust of the communities it serves. I commend the statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Nick Thomas-Simmons.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Home Secretary for her statement and for advance sight of it. And I, of course, pay tribute to Wendy Williams and her team for their work, and I welcome the further details set out today on changes at the Home Office. But the Windrush scandal must lead to real and lasting change. The review powerfully exposed some of the terrible situations people were forced into. Gloria, who had been in this country since she was 10, lost her job as a care worker as she was unable to renew her passport and prove her identity. Pauline, who came to the UK at 12 and qualified as a social worker, went on a 2-week holiday to Jamaica that became an 18-month nightmare. Detained and refused UK re-entry, losing her home and her livelihood. And these are just 2 examples of the lives devastated by this scandal, and all the more shocking that just 60 people received compensation from the Windrush compensation scheme in its first year of operation. Ministers must get a grip of this scheme. The review is clear that the Home Office should be more proactive in identifying people affected and putting right any detriment detected, with a focus on identifying people from elsewhere in the Commonwealth who may have been affected. So can the Home Secretary confirm today how many people the Home Office estimate are eligible for the Windrush compensation scheme? As of today, how many have applied? And of those, how many are from Commonwealth countries or related to them? And how many are from other countries, the category that arrived before 31st of December 1988 and are now settled here? And can she explain why it is that the published number of applicants seems so low, given the scale of the injustice? What does she expect the average turnaround time of a claim to be? The Home Secretary mentioned in her statement that over £1.5 million have been paid out. But it's also the case that there are people who were deemed eligible for the scheme early last year who still haven't received their compensation, and for whom every day without that money continues to be a struggle. And can the Home Secretary also tell us which minister specifically is in charge of the scheme? On the other recommendations, the 30 recommendations in total, the department should publish, Wendy Williams said, a comprehensive improvement plan within 6 months of this report. The Home Secretary mentioned a delivery plan in her statement. Can she now confirm, in line with the recommendation, she will publish that immediately? The Home Secretary should undertake a full review and evaluation of the hostile environment policy, individually and cumulatively. She did mention it. Can she tell us when she expects that review to be completed? The review also recommended the creation of a Migrants Commissioner. What powers will the Commissioner have? What budget will they control? And when will the recruitment process for that vital post begin? Madam Deputy Speaker, nobody disagrees that the Home Office should be fair, humane and outward-looking. But the Home Secretary said at the recent meeting of the Home Affairs Select Committee that Wendy Williams was only and I quote, her own words, a fraction away from calling the Home Office institutionally racist. Now, can I ask the Home Secretary how she felt about that? And in view of that, how she now reflects on the decade that her party has been in charge of the Home Office. The truth is, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the government has so little trust in this area that it's vital that we maintain maximum scrutiny. The Black Lives Matter movement highlighted the need not just to recognise the discrimination and racism that black people continue to face, but to demand action. Looking at the failure to act on so many previous reviews, the government is falling woefully short on that action. And that's why we will be holding them to account for delivering the vital changes outlined in this report and to act with the urgency that is required. Isn't the truth that the Windrush generation that gave so much to rebuilding this country after World War II deserve nothing less, and future generations, Madam Deputy Speaker, deserve so much more?
Home Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to restate my commitment to delivering not just the compensation for those who became victims of the Windrush scandal itself. It is absolutely right, and it is my focus and my determination and resolve to ensure that the individuals that were blighted, whose lives were shattered as a result of a series of measures, to quote Wendy Williams, that evolved under Labour, Coalition and Conservative governments, that they receive the compensation that they deserve. And it is a fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the injustices will not be resolved and fixed overnight. And I think I've levelled with the House on this point on a number of occasions. The mistreatment that they endured was simply unacceptable, and I will continue to do everything that I can within my power to lead the Home Office in terms of delivering on compensation, but ensuring that through this work, through the lessons learned review itself and through Wendy Williams's work, that we ensure that we right the wrongs, we properly compensate those that were affected in a proper way, and that will not happen overnight. I've already expanded the compensation scheme, so people will be able to apply to this scheme until at least April 2023. Madam Deputy Speaker, we have to go beyond that. I would be more than willing to go beyond that as well. We've made the criteria more generous so that people are able to receive the maximum compensation they rightly deserve. I've already said that £1.5 million of compensation has been offered to individuals, but of course I want to see compensation payments sped up. And with that, we've already had 1,342 applications have been received by the scheme. Final offers have been made to over 154 individuals. Urgent and exceptional payments have been made to hundreds of individuals. In fact, over 1,400 individuals, have been supported by the Vulnerable Persons team. We have had a number of cases, a significant number of cases that have been closed. I have also said, in fact, I think at the Select Committee just last week, that there are a vast number of cases, and I will say it now, 1,000 cases, that are not just being led by the Home Office, but they're split across other government departments as well, in terms of ascertaining information and data. That includes HMRC and includes DWP as well. I have, Madam Deputy Speaker, on previous occasions, and I'll restate this as well, in terms of outreach, the outreach and engagement with those across a wide range of communities, including other Commonwealth countries, is absolutely vital, because we simply, and partly through COVID as well, we've not been able to continue the direct face-to-face engagement with community organisations and representatives in the way in which we had planned. And only by doing that can we identify others that have not even applied for the compensation scheme too. There is more work that needs to be done. I'm very honest about that. I'm very open about that. So the Honourable Gentleman speaks about scrutiny. He's more than welcome to continue to ask questions, and we will provide answers where we can. But at the same time, we are subject to not full data, not full information, and I'd be more than happy to continue, as I have openly done so, to work with colleagues from right across the House, across all political parties, to ensure that more people do come forward. And I think that's something that we should all collectively step up to encourage.
Durham Mayhew.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the cross-government working group clearly has a key role to consider the changes needed to support the Windrush generation, but also a wider scope to address challenges facing black and ethnic minority people across the country, across society, in education, in work and in health. Can my right honourable friend update the House on how she sees this group developing and whether she considers quarterly meetings as sufficient to make good progress?
Home Secretary.
Well, my friend asks a really important question, and I fundamentally believe, not just through my time at the Home Office, but actually even now, every time I look at Windrush cases, read the details, read the backgrounds of the hardship and the suffering, you know, there is much more that we need to do as political leaders, individually and collectively, to ensure that, yes, we celebrate our differences, but remember that we are one nation and one community. And with that, the outreach groups, the stakeholder groups that we have established are absolutely critical to ensuring that we not just drive change in our practices and our policies, but also that we communicate in that compassionate and humane way and reach out to individuals in the right kind of way. Now, he asked the question whether meeting quarterly is enough. In fact, we don't just have the quarterly meetings. I'm in regular contact with representatives and chairs of stakeholder groups, and that will continue. I intend to leave no stone unturned. So while I appreciate individuals in this House may be more focused on the number of cases, I personally believe we absolutely need to fulfil cases, deliver on compensation. We also must look at people and not just cases. And that also means that we can actually look at the wider policies that we need to explore. And of course, my Russian friend, the Prime Minister, is doing this through his new Race and Equality Group as well, to get the right policies in place so that we can address many of the injustices that people constantly speak about.
Joanna Cherry.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to welcome this very full statement, which contains some substantial commitments and aims, and to thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of it. When Wendy Williams gave evidence to the Joint Committee on Human Rights earlier this month, she said that the Windrush scandal had highlighted fundamental cultural, political and institutional factors relevant to how the Home Office carries out its duties across the board. And she said that these needed fixed. And it seems to me that the Home Secretary is recognising that in the statement she set out. But Wendy Williams also said that she'd looked at the Home Office response to previous reviews and reports, and she'd found that the responses tended to be characterised by a very quick acknowledgement of the result and then a focus on process rather than on the fundamental issues which the respective reviews had identified. And she said that in the past, the remedial actions taken by the Home Office were superficial to the extent that there was action at all, and that they didn't have a lasting effect. And Wendy Williams said that often many of the same issues that were identified kept coming up successively, time and time again, but in different contexts. So can the Home Secretary reassure me that the steps she intends to take will avoid the pitfalls that Wendy Williams has identified with previous reviews? Secondly, and I have three questions for her. The second one is, on her third commitment to changing the Home Office's openness to scrutiny and policy and decision-making, she talks about engagement. Can she give me a commitment that the engagement will include engagement with the devolved government in Edinburgh? And thirdly and finally, the Home Secretary and I don't always see eye to eye But I want to thank her for doing what she was unable to do last time, which is to confirm that she will be carrying out the root and branch review of the hostile environment policy, which Wendy Williams stipulated in Recommendation 7. And in relation to that, I have a specific question for her. Will she tell us whether measures such as the right to rent scheme will be paused pending the outcome of the hostile environment policy? Thank you.
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Lady, the Right Honourable Lady, raises some very important points. I think, quite frankly, about how the Home Office actually not just undertakes reviews, but picks up on recommendations and enacts recommendations around reviews itself. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's fair to say that the Windrush review, the Wendy Williams Lessons Learned review, is a review like no other. Thankfully, it is a one-off review of an absolutely shocking scandal that took place, and as I've already said in my statement, identified and marks a stain on the history of our country, but also scars my department significantly. As a result, the measures that I've outlined today, just the 5 steps alone, that are very focused on the Home Office itself, encompassing policy aspects, are very detailed. They're detailed for a reason. They are not a tick box response, and they are not a quick let's fix this response and pay lip service response either. There is a great deal of work that is required, and if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, this speaks to the Right Honourable Lady's third point around reviewing of the compliant environment and the work that will need to be undertaken there, which will take time. And obviously I will report back, and as a department we will report back exactly on how policies are affected, specifically on that. I think it's fair to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, my commitment on this issue, but more fundamentally with regards to the Home Office, is absolutely solid and firm. I have seen all sorts of practices. I have experienced all sorts of practices in the Home Office, and I have been on the receiving end of certain practices in the Home Office as well, which quite frankly speak to some of the points that came out of Wendy Williams' review. Therefore, our commitment is solid and it is firm. The Honourable Lady also asks about engagement with the devolved administrations. She should take that as a given. There is always more work that needs to be done on that front, and that is something that I'm committed to do.
Dr. Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome my Right Honourable friend's statement today. Having compensation available that people are aware of is is very important, but trust in the system also needs to be rebuilt so that people feel confident in claiming. What's my Right Honourable friend doing to ensure that people aren't just aware of the funds available, but they are confident to claim?
Home Secretary.
Well, my honourable friend raises a very important point, and he would have heard in my statement my comment about rebuilding trust. For people to come forward, Madam Deputy Speaker, they have to have not just confidence but trust in the organisation that they are engaging with. And that is fundamental to the work that the Home Office is now undertaking. But also on a practical level, and I've been here before at the dispatch box where I have spoken about the practical steps that need to be undertaken. We need to do better in terms of our outreach. We have not undertaken the engagement opportunities because of COVID and obviously the problems of getting out and around the country. That will change. I've set up obviously new stakeholder groups. We have a new communications campaign. Officials will be going back into communities, and I'm more than happy. I think I said this when I came to the House the day after the publication of Wendy's report on the 19th of March, that I want to work with colleagues across the House to ensure that we are working in their communities to rebuild the bonds and bridges of trust, but importantly to actually build those links, but reach out to individuals that have been affected.
Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. What happened to the Windrush generation at the hands of the British Home Office was deeply shameful. And can I welcome the Home Secretary's commitment to fundamental reform of the culture and the processes in the Home Office, and her commitment to change the way the Home Office works and also to welcome the openness to scrutiny that she referred to. We and the committee will welcome further details from her of her plans. When she referred to needing to have a humane face from the Home Office, that must start with those who've been most badly wronged. And she will know there are still huge delays in the compensation process. I've had 2 more cases given to me this afternoon of people who've been waiting for over a year, still waiting, unable to get any response back from the Home Office about what is happening to their case. We're hearing case after case where that is happening. So could she now urgently review the operation of the compensation scheme so that initial payments can be made far, far more quickly? This is an ageing generation. It is urgent that they get support.
Home Secretary.
The Right Honourable Lady will be aware of my comments around cases and the changes, new caseworkers that have come into place just when we spoke at the Select Committee last week. If she would like to provide me with the 2 new cases that she has, I will take a look at them myself.
Tim Lawton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Again, can I welcome the very personal ownership that the Home Secretary has taken of identifying and implementing solutions to the problems that Windrush revealed, particularly around people, not cases, as she said. Windrush uncovered just how complicated, opaque and costly the whole immigration system is. Numerous and complex different qualifying criteria, not just for citizenship under Windrush, but for indefinite leave to remain, child sound applications and so on. So will she, as part of the people-friendly reforms, which I welcome, and the review of the immigration legislation, make sure that the whole immigration system is simplified, streamlined and made much more affordable for all?
Home Secretary.
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for his comment and his point, and he will know through the work that we are undertaking in the Home Office itself, through reforms to the immigration system, bringing, of course, in the points-based system as well, that we are looking at the Law Commission's recommendations on simplifying the immigration system. It has become far too complicated, and it is right. This is the moment that we need to now streamline the system, make it much more open, more transparent, much more flexible, much more agile, but actually much more fairer.
Steve McCabe.
I welcome the Home Secretary's statement, but if we're learning lessons, why won't she act now on looked after children and care leavers eligible under the EU settlement scheme to ensure that they are all urgently processed? Otherwise, they're destined to end up in exactly the same position as the Windrush victims.
Home Secretary.
With respect, Madam Deputy Speaker, I disagree with his last comment, and we are when it comes to carers and children in particular, as he has rightly highlighted, if I may say so, there is a great deal of effort taking place, not just in the department, but working with local authorities, specifically on the groups that he speaks about. That is right that we do that. Of course, we are committed to doing that. But obviously, there are some complexities right now, as he will know, throughout the COVID period that we and others, local authorities themselves, has come up with. But if he's got particular cases that he wants me to look at, I'll be more than happy to do so.
Sarah Dines.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can my right honourable friend confirm that the £1.5 million already offered by way of legal compensation will be the start of a proper and thorough process of compensation? And will she agree with me that justice delayed is actually justice denied?
Home Secretary.
My friend is absolutely right, and as I've highlighted both today and in previous statements as well, it is absolutely my intention, my desire and my focus, and the focus of the Home Office as well, to ensure that we do more around compensation. These cases, I'm sorry to say, are complicated for a whole range of reasons, but that does not necessarily mean that we should allow process to just consume these cases. We must make sure that we are getting the support to individuals, and the department is absolutely geared up to do that.
Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Recommendation 6 of Wendy Williams' review calls for an education programme to be introduced for all new and existing Home Office staff to make sure that all staff learn about the history of the UK and its relationship with the rest of the world, including Britain's colonial history, the history of inward and outward migration and the history of Black Britons. It is right that the Home Secretary has announced today that that programme is being introduced in the Home Office. Would she agree with me that if we are to avoid such a shameful scandal as the Windrush scandal ever happening again, that content is important not only for staff in the Home Office, but for every child being educated in British schools. And if she would agree that that's important, would she speak to her colleague, the Minister for Schools, who has recently refused to meet with me and campaigners from my constituency, young people who are desperate to see that reform in their education system so that all of them can say collectively, our history is British history?
Home Secretary.
Of course.
Neil O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I strongly welcome this statement. I strongly welcome the lead my honourable friend is taking on this hugely important issue. What steps is my honourable friend taking to make sure that Wendy Williams' recommendations are taken forward as quickly as possible?
Home Secretary.
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and he will know, with regards to the recommendation, there are a vast number of recommendations. And Wendy herself emphasised the need to ensure that we didn't just literally fulfil them all immediately, that we had the time, the space, and gave all the recommendations the right consideration, which is why we're taking this approach, in this phased approach and phased way right now. I am focusing on two particular elements. One is obviously the compensation. It is right that we literally go through case by case, look at the complexities behind individuals. And the second significant area is the culture and the department itself. So that is the focus, and as I've said repeatedly, of course I will continue to share with this House, Madam Deputy Speaker, updates in terms of the recommendations, and I've also spoken about the department now being open to more scrutiny. That will obviously play into the review that Wendy would take next year with regards to the department.
11 withdrawn, so we go to Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've heard from across the House the gratitude of all members, I think, in terms of the Home Secretary's commitment to dealing with this issue and her ongoing progress to address the failings in the report. But towards the end of her statement, she said Wendy Williams will come back to the Home Office in September 2021 to reassess things. What will happen in the interim period? How will ministers and officials look at progress or any potential lack of progress between now and September 21?
Home Secretary.
Well, first of all, let me assure the honourable gentleman that I will continue to be working with Wendy Williams throughout the implementation of recommendations. It is important that I do that. It's important the department does that. We cannot literally just carry on without fulfilling not just the recommendations, but without actually taking that external counsel and support and advice. I think it's right that next year, 2021, well over a year in, that Wendy literally looks at the progress of the department. That is absolutely right, but this will be ongoing. This will absolutely be ongoing, and I think we have to take this measured approach, but also the responsive approach in terms of fulfilling these recommendations.
We now go to Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Concerns remain that even before the Home Office had even responded to the Lessons Learned review, the UK Government has been pressing ahead with plans to extend the reach of the policy to EU citizens in the immigration bill. Given what she has said today, can the Secretary of State guarantee that EU citizens will not also become victims of this hostile environment created by her government?
Home Secretary.
Yes.
We now go to Dr. Luke Evans.
I'm grateful to the Secretary of State for her compassion and talking of the face behind the case. In my constituency of Bosworth, I have Major Lyons, who was born in India in 1945 to British parents who were stationed over there when his father was in the British Army and he returned in 47. He then went on to serve in the army for 30 years. He's actually got a British subject passport and like to change it to a British citizen passport and has had to pay £1,000 and have an appointment to promise his allegiance to the UK. This has similarities with the Windrush scandal. And so what steps is my right honourable friend taking to protect veterans who are being asked to make promises of allegiance to a country they've served for?
Home Secretary.
Well, my honourable friend raises a very, very important case, but also an important point of principle around veterans, effectively, that do give their allegiance to our country, seek to serve our nation, and obviously how we support them and how we almost give justice to those individuals as well. So on that particular point, I will update him and the House in due course on some of the changes that I'm making in that particular area. And specific to the case that he raises, I'd be more than happy to take a look at that in further detail.
Zara Sultana.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Windrush Lessons Learned Review recommends that the Home Office implements a comprehensive programme to educate staff about Britain's colonial history. But the Prime Minister, in an article he wrote for The Spectator, said that the problem with British colonialism was not, and I quote, that we were once in charge, but that we are not in charge anymore. If we are to have trust in this government to deliver that education programme, will the Home Secretary condemn the Prime Minister's remarks and acknowledge the brutal crimes that British colonialism inflicted upon millions of people across the globe?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think my statement was very clear in terms of the needs of this government, but also the needs of my department, the Home Office, to learn from the recommendations that Wendy Williams put forward. That is effectively what I'm focusing on, and it is right. If she heard my statement, she would have heard of my commitment. That is also a commitment by this government to ensure that we right the wrongs of the past.
Steve Baker.
This excellent statement puts the Home Office well on the way to establishing the culture of honour, which will make sure we treat people so much better, and it will change how they feel about themselves and how they feel about our country. So I congratulate the government on what my honourable friend has done. What will she do, though, to make sure that people, not cases, is more than just a slogan?
Secretary.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and there is, I think this is a point of reflection, actually, not just for the Home Office, but actually for the whole of government, when it comes to treating individuals with not just compassion, but with the respect that they deserve. And Madam Deputy Speaker, as we are all honourable members of this House and members of Parliament, we are all familiar with people engagement, casework ourselves. And it is important in the Home Office that casework is not seen through the lens of process, that we understand the situations of individual people, we understand their circumstances, we treat them with respect, we listen to them in particular, and we support them. And that is absolutely my aim and determination through the caseworkers that we have in the department and the work that they're now doing to actually turn around compensation schemes and claims themselves, that they spend that time with the individuals, they learn off their backgrounds, and they give them the respect and the service that they deserve.
Sarah Jones.
Thank you. Carlton Young was the first black senior civil servant in the Home Office, and he's a Croydon councillor, and he contributed to the Wendy Williams review. 20 years on from his appointment, the Home Office still doesn't have senior black civil servants helping to better inform policy development. Can she tell us more about how she's going to rapidly address that failure? And if I may, Luna House and the Home Office, a lot of the Home Office buildings are in my constituency, and a lot of my constituents work there. I welcome what the Home Secretary said about seeing a face behind a case. What some of the staff have said to me is that that's very difficult when you have so many, it's not just a cultural issue, it's also when you have so many cases to deal with. Is the Home Secretary confident that she has enough people to do the job properly?
Yeah. The Honourable Lady raises, actually she's made some very important points, she really has. First of all, acknowledging the lack of senior leadership and diversity in senior leadership, particularly in the Home Office. If I may say so, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is a feature, sadly, across government, across civil service, and that is something that this government is collectively trying to address and trying to change. As the leader of the Home Office, it is my responsibility to look at what more we can do to promote support, diversity, even mentoring. I feel very strongly through my previous career as well in terms of mentoring individuals from across all backgrounds. It is wrong. It is absolutely wrong. I've raised this at a senior management level in my own department, that particularly with our own staff members from Black, Asian, minority, ethnic communities, they are actually stuck at certain grades in my department. That is not acceptable at all. It really isn't. We should find ways in which we can find mentoring schemes to actually grow them and develop them and their careers. And I absolutely believe in that, and I want to achieve much more on that front. But specifically, she also references Luna House. The remarkable work, actually, that individuals and colleagues from the Home Office undertake at Luna House, which in itself, if I may say so, even in Wendy's report, the references to Luna House, were not necessarily within a positive light. There are a lot of cases. We deal with people. The Home Office is a case-working department, a department that deals with thousands of people day in, day out. In terms of staffing, I think it's not just about the numbers, it's about the training and the support around our own personnel. That's really important, and that is why I need to do more. The department, my Perm Sec, needs to do more as well in terms of investing in people. I fundamentally believe in that, and I think that is the right approach forward. We will grow and develop our staff so that we can actually work with people that come to us in a fundamentally different way.
Order, just a gentle reminder of this very important statement. I would like to get everybody in, but that means just sort of one question at a time, so the Home Secretary is able to give brisk answers as well. Scott Benton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome my Right Honourable friend's statement, and may I thank her for the rapid way in which her department has assisted some of my own constituents who have sadly been affected. Is she able to reassure the House that she will do everything within her power to make sure those who qualify receive the compensation they deserve as quickly as possible?
Home Secretary.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and he's heard me speak about the need to speed up more on compensation claims. We are doing everything we can, and of course I'm here to support anybody that brings a claim forward. My department will absolutely look at how we can process claims fast.
Chiomora.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Put bluntly, the report shows that racism was allowed to infect the Home Office, and its policies towards in terms of immigration and visas are still tainted by it. The Secretary of State refused to believe me when I said that no recourse to public funds left a Newcastle mum unable to feed her baby. But will she accept that I have constituents almost exclusively of Black and Asian heritage who are left for years in visa limbo? And will she commit to improving the access to resources of her department in order to give just and speedy decisions?
Well, I'm more than happy to give the assurance on her last point, but specifically on the case she has made, I said at the time I'd be more than happy to look at that. And so if she'd like to share the details with me, as I said, I'd be very happy to do so.
Caroline Noakes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I really welcome my Right Honourable friend's commitment to openness and transparency and to scrutiny. Will she let us know whether her department will therefore publish equality impact assessments that it's committed to carrying out? And will she perhaps blaze a trail across government by publishing the ethnicity pay gap that might exist within the Home Office?
Home Secretary.
My right honourable friend makes a really important point here. As I've already said, we are starting and embarking on this work. I intend to look at all aspects of equality pay, diversity, but also in terms of impact equality statements as well. So these are some of the key pillars, if I may say so, around policy development that the department will be looking at, and obviously I'll be reporting back in due course, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the steps that we undertake.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I also thank the City of State for her statement, for the control of the Windrush issue, and for her deep interest and commitment. There are some 30 recommendations from the Wendy Williams report. How does the Secretary of State believe that these can be implemented to ensure that applications adhere to not simply the letter of the policy, but the spirit of the policy, which would never have intended for this generation of those who did so much in the UK when we needed them most to suffer so needlessly?
My friend is absolutely right, and he touches on, Madam Deputy Speaker, some of the sentiment that's already been echoed in the House around fulfilling the recommendations and not paying lip service to them. This cannot be, and as I've said, the report itself was a report like no other. That's why it's important we have the time, the space, pay attention and give it the determined attention and diligence that's required to make sure these recommendations are implemented in the right way, working with Wendy, but also working with other stakeholders too.
22 withdrawn, so to Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Windrush used to be a name associated with great pride in this country, but because of the scandal, it's become associated with failure on the part of the Home Office and letting down people who deserved better from this country. While I welcome the statement and the Home Secretary's commitment to the recommendations, would the Home Secretary also consider that given that the government is about to end free movement and leave millions of EU citizens vulnerable to the same sort of failure, would she pause the immigration policy until she's implemented the recommendations?
Home Secretary.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it's important to say I'm here, and I've said this previously, specifically looking at the Windrush recommendations and how we apply them going forward. She is alluding to the EUSS scheme, which has already safeguarded the status of over 3.4 million people. If I recall rightly, there are members of this House who said at the time that'll never happen, and it has happened, and we will continue to do everything possible, Madam Deputy Speaker, to ensure that EU citizens in the UK get their status secured, and we've got a separate scheme and a separate programme of engagement around that work.
James Sunderland.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Home Secretary will appreciate the clear distinction between those who are here legally and those who are here illegally. Could she please confirm that our new points-based immigration system will allow us to welcome the very same talent, hard work and skill as our proud Windrush generation?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I have spoken, in fact my honourable friend, the Immigration Minister has as well, repeatedly about not just welcoming the brightest and the best, but being open and fair in terms of how we invite people over to our country, but having a system that is fair in a way in which it will end discrimination between non-EU and EU countries, and that's absolutely vital, as he'll know, through the points-based system.
25 withdrawn, so Bob Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I remind the House how many members of the Windrush generation and their children actually joined the armed forces? I served with a great number of them, and I thought they were superb. And I asked the Home Secretary if she would endorse that comment.
I absolutely will endorse that comment, and I agree with every word that he has just echoed.
Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary knows of my concern that the Department is still not engaging with the scandal of thousands of overseas students whose lives were ruined when they were falsely accused of cheating in English language tests, and that today destitution is being inflicted on hard-working families with a legal right to be in the UK because the no recourse to public funds restriction is being kept during this pandemic. They are being penalised, contrary to her statement. Does she recognise that this deeply troubling pattern requires changes of policy as well as of departmental management?
Home Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Specifically to the Right Honourable Gentleman's point, I know he has met with the Immigration Minister a number of times on the issue of English language testing. And in fact, the former Home Secretary put a written ministerial statement down, I think last year, outlining his response, some of the responses and concerns that were raised at the time. He also raises the issue of no recourse to public funds. However, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, he puts that within the context of people that he said are in need of support and funds. And as I've already articulated and echoed to the House, if there are particular cases he would like to raise with me, he's very welcome to do so, and I will look at them directly.
Darren Henry.
Madam Deputy Speaker, does my right honourable friend agree that playing party politics on the Windrush generation is shameful? And given that the hostile environment started in 2007, would she join with me in urging the party opposite, the members opposite, to work with the government to right this wrong?
Home Secretary.
My honourable friend makes an important point about the responsibility we all have in terms of learning from the past and trying to right the wrongs of the past collectively. Now, he has sat in this House diligently, in fact, over previous statements, if I recall, and the last Windrush statement as well, and asked the question in a similar vein. And he would have heard me say to all members of this House that whether it's on individual cases or whether it's in our tone, our posture, or how we address the issue of injustices, that we have to work together. No individual, no government, no organisation has the sole answer to this. It's important that we work collectively and together, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Deirdre Brock.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We hear that caseworkers have been told to demand of some claimants that they make their case beyond reasonable doubt, a high standard that many will struggle to meet. Why has the bar been set so high, and will that be reviewed as part of the hostile environment policy evaluation?
Home Secretary.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I've already said several times, with regards to the cases themselves, These are complicated cases, and individuals need to provide certain amounts of information with regards to the processes of claims and not just payments. That is part of the scheme that was created before I became Home Secretary with Martin Ford QC, but also the scheme was developed in conjunction with members of the Windrush generation. Now, I have said, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I'm prepared now to look at any complexities around the scheme. I said this at the Select Committee last week as well. If we need to look at amending the scheme going forward that will enable and facilitate quicker payments or swifter cases being turned around, we will absolutely look at that.
Henry Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Similar to the Windrush situation are the descendants of Chagos Islanders, whose families were exiled from the British Indian Ocean Territory and now face citizenship problems in many respects. In her announced review of nationality law in the statement that we have just heard, will my right honourable friend commit to looking to the case of the Chagosian people?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have touched on this as part of the wider work that we will do within the Home Office. And of course, that will touch on all sorts of aspects of nationality law and the complexities around immigration law and the immigration system itself. As I've said, we need the time and the ability to do this, which is what we're undertaking right now and will continue to do so. So in due course, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will of course report back and we will look at all these issues. Many issues I think will still come out and surface in the weeks and months ahead.
Joy Morrissey.
Deputy Speaker, I would like to thank my right honourable friend for the excellent work in committing to right the wrongs of the Windrush generation. But may I ask that my right honourable friend considers further reforms to how the Home Office's processes immigration. As someone who experienced the joys of Luna House personally, I know that it is a labyrinth of mismanaged records and cases, and there are some excellent civil servants, but we need to be people-focused rather than case-focused.
Secretary.
My honourable friend speaks with experience of processes, a point that has been touched on already, Madam Deputy Speaker. There are many lessons to be learned, but also with regards to process, there are issues in terms of management of case files, technology, record keeping, data retention, you name it, and these are long-term and long-standing issues that the Home Office needs to grip, but obviously this is part of wider changes to government and the machinery of government as well that we are absolutely looking at.
Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Home Secretary has said in her statement, if we find a problem, I will fix it. Well, let me commend to her the work of We Belong and my constituent, Chris-Anne Jarrett. These are young people who have come to this country, some as young as the age of 2. They're on a long route to citizenship, 10 years, and they have to pay every 3 years over £2,500 in fees. These are young people who will become British citizens, but every hurdle is being put in their way, and they are passionate about this country. They're not going to live anywhere else. She could save herself resources, save staff time, and support these young people if she were to look at this. And I'm sure Chris-Anne and We Belong would be willing to be engaging with her department on this.
Well, I look forward to that engagement, if that's something we'll facilitate.
We now go to Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And my right honourable friend will be all too aware of the multicultural nature of my constituency. Not a day goes by without someone coming to my office, or at the moment virtually coming to my office, with a new immigration case. Many of these cases are complicated, stretch back a number of years, and are in a queue in the Home Office. So can I urge my right honourable friend, as she goes forward with these reforms on the Windrush generation, that she doesn't remove resources from dealing with people in the backlog, that in fact actually concentrates more experienced caseworkers to clear this backlog so that people that have been living in this country for an awful long time can actually normalise their position.
Home Secretary.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and let me just give him this assurance that the two are separate. Obviously, we have a bespoke team that's working on Windrush. And I hear him completely on wider immigration cases, which, to be quite frank, Madam Deputy Speaker, because centres have been closed and all sorts over the last 4 months, will not have assisted in terms of time around processing. But clearly, as we are now all getting back to work, with that also means that claims will be processed and people will be given the attention that they deserve.
35 withdrawn, so to Jack Brereton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I thank my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, for the support her department has given to my constituents in Stoke-on-Trent South who have been affected. Will she ensure everything is done to ensure they receive the compensation that they're entitled to as soon as possible?
It's a similar point to colleagues in the House around the scheme itself, and of course my determination to ensure that compensation does get out to individuals quickly. And as I've already said, I think, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll restate the point that where changes may need to take place around the scheme, we will look to undertake them.
We now go to Marion Fellows.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The no recourse to public funds policy is another example of a policy that affects migrants and the BAME community and must be scrapped immediately. Will the Secretary of State show that she is serious about addressing inequality and scrap this policy?
Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as I have previously said, all policies are under review in the department, but specifically, if I may, on no recourse to public funds, it is right that those who benefit from the state are also contributing to it, and therefore this policy is very specific to migrants who come to our country being financially independent, and that is something that obviously is also in the interest of British taxpayers.
Dr. Kieran Mullen. Not here. We now go to Naz Shah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, can I thank the Home Secretary for the tone and the ownership that she has displayed in the Chamber today about the issues which have impacted on the Windrush generation. Will the Home Secretary acknowledge that the Windrush scandal highlights that institutions can fail, discrimination and prejudice against individuals, and they're often denialism, and only after these become a scandal are they forced to accept the dark reality. So can the Home Secretary tell me what changes the Home Office are implementing so issues such as racism can be raised and highlighted in a manner where they will be believed?
Home Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As I've already stated, Madam Deputy Speaker, Wendy's review was important because she described a number of measures that evolved under Labour, Coalition and Conservative governments over decades. But as I've already said, it's important that we all look at ourselves, because we must all be better at walking in other people's shoes. And we must all take responsibilities for the failings that have happened in the past. But we are also one community, and we deserve to treat each other with respect and therefore all learn lessons from the past.
Last question, Simon Fell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend referred to changing the Home Office's openness to scrutiny. Quite rightly, this will lead to the Home Office better understanding the communities and groups which it serves. But what steps will my right honourable friend put in place to ensure they can apply a similar level of understanding to the data that the Home Office holds and the impact that changes in policy might have to the people that data reflects?
Well, my friend makes a very important point around data and the type of trends and information that comes through to the Home Office. And in fact, the Honourable Lady also touched on data and some of the processes as well. When it comes to scrutiny, we have to look at all aspects, not just of policies, but information, trends, flows, immigration data, all sorts of data that comes into the department. But also we have to have the skills to do that, and that is part of the change that not just in the Home Office, but I think we're seeing now across government when it comes to data analytics, information, but how we can therefore respond on policy as a government, but at the same time treat people with compassion and fairness.
Thank you. Point of order, Owen Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 16th of June, the UK government and US government signed a